Hi, I'm Marcus Schmidt, Senior Director of Product Management at West IP Communications, and welcome to Whiteboard Fridays. So let's talk about when something bad happens in your communication environment. If you've got a unified communications as a service or cloud-enabled UC environment, there's a lot of things we can do to make sure that if the disaster happens, you want to make sure your business keeps on going. So you hear about them called disaster recovery, business continuity kinds of scenarios. So let's look at one example of a customer where basically everything to the left of the dotted line is something that they have on premise, right, in their facility. And they happen to have an IP PBX here that is up and running most of the time, but let's say for some reason it decides to have a bad day and then IP PBX decides to fail. So if that was going to fail, basically all of these phones, all these things that are hanging off that IP PBX are not able to receive calls anymore. Well, if you take advantage of West IP Communications cloud services, what we can do is dynamically take those same numbers that were assigned to these phones and reroute them through the switch out to the router and basically bypass the IP PBX and take all that call control out into the cloud, basically taking advantage of the fact we can still deliver the calls down to the phones, bypassing the IP PBX until it gets up and running again, basically taking all the PBX functionality and pushing it up into the cloud. Now, another thing that could happen is within West IP's configuration, now we do a really good job of trying to make sure everything's up and running 24/7, 365, but if one server happens to die or one disk happens to fail within a storage array, we've created enough redundancy within the cloud and enough shared resource pools that if one thing happens to go down, the rest of the environment can pick up and keep on running. So if you wanted to get out of the whole IP PBX world and get all of that into the cloud, you're counting on the fact your cloud provider has a sufficient redundancy and backup and resiliency built into the way they've built their solutions, which we've done here at West IP. Now the last one is if you have multiple carriers. So our West IP network is connected to a variety of different carriers that provide voice and network services. And we all have heard the story about, some person's out digging a trench somewhere and they put a backhoe through a cable. Well, if carrier A were to happen to have that scenario, the fact that we have multiple carriers lets us reroute some of that traffic to carrier B. So a lot of our customers end up using this multi-carrier architecture. So they have one primary carrier and then a backup carrier. So if something were to happen, they can keep on going by routing all that over to a different carrier. So those are some examples of the way that West IP and Cloud Unified Communications helps enable business continuity and disaster recovery scenarios.